Mm. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special Friday edition of Houston Texans football on Bleacher Report. Now, we actually have quite a bit to talk about today. My name is Ruben Calavio. You can find me on YouTube. Just type in 713 Houston Sportcast. Below me, Harley Dugan at TheLead _ Houston. You can find him on YouTube. Shout out to you, man. We're making some moves out there. We want to give a shout out to Bleach Report allowing us to come on here, talk Houston Texans football. Always a shout out to the man upstairs. How's it going, Harley?
Doing great, man. We got, like you said, a lot to talk to and little time to talk about it. The Texans made some big moves, and
Mm.
it's better for the present state and the future as well.
Yes. So one of the big moves happened yesterday, and that was the Houston Texans making a rare trade within the division, sending a seventh round, a future seventh, to the Jacksonville Jaguars in exchange for veteran wide receiver Christian Kirk. Now, this hardly shocked everyone because before yesterday, it was reported by Shefty that that Christian Kirk was going to be released. So the Houston Texans said, "Hey, I'm not going to wait till free agency. I'm going to do what I did last year when I sent that 7 to Joe Mixon. I'm going to send another one here for Christian Kirk, and he is now your wide receiver 2 in 2025. Your thoughts on that?"
Ecstatic. We were
Mm.
talking about how Christian Kirk is a realistic option for the Houston Texans. We talked about the other wide receivers that were available, but ultimately we kept landing back on Christian Kirk
Yes.
and what was potentially a cut candidate due
Mm-hmm.
to contract reasons and cap space. The Houston Texans, like you said, they do the old Joe Mixon special from last year. Hey, you're gonna get cut, Joe? No, no. I'm gonna go ahead and give you a 7 round pick. They do the exact same thing with Christian Kirk, and that should only excite every fan here in Houston because Christian Kirk is a slot receiver, and Nick Caley is. I mean, he came from the LA Rams, and the LA Rams know how to utilize slot receivers to the fullest. Cooper Cup, Puka Nakua, like both of them guys work extensively in the slot. So I would expect, as long as the on my only negative there is Christian Kirk's got to stay healthy. That's the only thing. As long as he stays healthy.
Mm.
He's had 2 season-ending injuries back-to-back years.
Yeah.
Last year was a broken collarbone. And I forgot what the other one was the year before, but that's the only thing for me
Mm.
because he's only had 1 year of clean health with the Jaguars. But that year, he had 80 plus catches, 1,100 yards receiving, and 8 touchdowns. So um, stay healthy. You're a legitimate slot weapon, and the Texans are a whole lot better, and they should be restructuring his contract some point.
Yeah, and that's what was, one thing that a lot of people were talking about. A lot of people said, well, even though you make the trade, you are paying him $16.5 million this year. No, I don't think he is going to play on that 1 year, $16.5 million deal. I do think the Houston Texans are going to come up with a contract extension for Christian Kirk, making him a Houston Texan for at least 2 seasons, and the money gets spread out. It would be even cheaper for the Houston Texans. Nick Caserio, I think he took advantage of a new GM in Jacksonville, and if healthy, this is going to look very good on Nick Caserio's resume.
Yeah, very good. Again, a tandem between him and Nico Collins already sounds promising.
Exciting.
And and this is just the tip of the iceberg because the Texans should not be done at the
No.
wide receiver position. There's still other guys you can go
Mhm.
grab. You still have some good amount of money, especially with these new restructures coming out as well too. And you can always look at the
Mhm.
NFL draft at 25 for a wide receiver. So yeah, hell of a move by Nick Casario and company.
And what does this say about Nick Casario, Harley? Because this is now back-to-back years where he's traded a seventh round pick. He's traded two seventh round picks, Harley, and in return got Joe Mixon and now Christian Kirk. Now, we don't know what Christian Kirk could yet be here in Houston, but what Joe Mixon gave us was 1,000 yards and double-digit touchdowns. If Christian Kirk gives us anything close to that, this trade was successful. And what gives me a little bit of comfort is his injury last year, his season-ending injury. He played in 8 games, 27 catches, 379 yards, 1 touchdown. Like you mentioned, was a broken collarbone. So nothing lower leg, nothing lower body. So I guess that is kind of the comfort. I'm like, all right, man, just stay healthy, watch how you fall. But
Mhm.
with Christian Kirk, man, you go back to his time in Arizona with Kyler Murray. He was a home run type of guy. You go to his first season in Jacksonville, right? Gets a big 4 year, I think $80 million contract, a
Yes.
contract where we all went like, wow, they paid
Mhm.
Christian Kirk. And man, in the first year, like you mentioned, 84 receptions, 1,108 yards, 8 touchdowns. That's a Pro Bowl season right there, Harley. And I don't know how much Christian Kirk has left in the tank, but I think maybe some of his best football could still be ahead of him with CJ Stroud throwing him the football.
Yeah, and I fully agree with you right there. We're gonna get a CJ Stroud that with Nick Caley, they're gonna be utilizing a lot of them quick passes, and a lot of that is gonna be going towards Christian Kirk. His
Mm,
release, his separation off the ball is what's gonna separate, no pun intended, him between other wide receivers
mhm.
in this group. You know, Metch and Hutch, like both of them guys, they're going to have to work in order to earn their spot back on this team. They've had plenty of opportunities, and it just hasn't happened. But ultimately, this Texans team has gotten so much better with Christian Kirk. But again, this should not be where this just stops. Like,
Mhm.
they still, like, I am not relieved at all at wide receiver. I'm excited that they grabbed a really good football player in Christian Kirk, but they still have to add more in order to keep the excitement rolling here in Houston.
No, I think this was the start, right? And I think General Manager Nick Caserio saw the situation going on in Jacksonville, and just decided to take advantage of it. And we are seeing a fire sale in Jacksonville. Also, when you talk about Christian Kirk, the player, good routes, can get
Mhm.
separation, can find, the weaknesses in defense. I will say though, Harley, sometimes he does drop the occasional
Yes,
big
yes,
pass.
yes.
He'll drop a crucial third down, or he'll drop one that ends up in the hands of the other team. So you hope, right? He gets rid of those yips when he comes here to Houston, and maybe with CJ Stroud throwing the football, he wants to take better advantage of those opportunities. What you like about Christian Kirk is he really is dangerous in the slot. He really is dangerous over the middle, and he is a mismatch out there. And can you just imagine him and Nico Collins just he motioned to the same side as Nico, and defenses don't know what the hell is going to
Mhm.
happen. And you talked about how with the Los Angeles Rams, they asked their receivers to run good routes, separate, catch the ball, be a willing blocker. Christian Kirk is a willing blocker. I wouldn't say
Mhm.
he's the best,
No,
blocker out there, but
but the
he's
will.
willing to give an effort, right?
Mhm.
And that's what you want at the end of the day. If healthy, I could see a 600-yard season, maybe 4 or 5 touchdowns for Christian Kirk. I think that's for me, that's the low for him. Anything more than that, I mean, really, when we're talking about a seventh round pick, Harley, what type of production do you need to see from Christian Kirk to say, yeah, this was a good deal? Because even when there was a lot of people praising the Houston Texans for making this move, you have, of course, you have the naysayers that say, wow, you just traded a draft pick for a receiver who's been injured, season injuries, like you mentioned the past 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a lot. Again, there's still some doubt,
Yeah.
but I mean, you gave up a seventh round pick. There's little to no risk here. I mean, so if Christian Kirk even had a bad year, let's say, it's still better than a seventh round pick.
Yeah.
Because a seventh round pick is more than likely not going to be touching your football field. Christian Kirk immediately changes what you do offensively. Now you can game plan accordingly. You got two chess pieces for Nick Caley to work with. Obviously, you need to get some more to help him out and to help this offense and to help CJ Stroud out. But I mean, Kirk, I think as long again, it's just the injuries for me. That's my only biggest one. I know he's had 5 drops in back-to-back years, and it just seems like the drops have came in crucial moments for the Jaguars. So yeah, he's gonna have himself a very fine quarterback throwing him the football here. Why not?
Yeah, and you know what, man? If there's one guy you don't want to piss off, man, that's CJ Stroud. But I
That
am
is pretty
excited
true.
for this, man. What number do you think he wears? You think it's one?
Yeah, I mean, he
I
has
think it's safe to
13.
say Stephon Diggs is not going to be a Houston Texan in
That is
2025.
true.
Will you? I mean, we've heard
13 right
that,
now.
if it's a team friendly deal, the
Mhm.
Texans will be, interested in bringing him back. I mean, what would a receiving core of Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Christian Kirk do for you? I would say this is the unction, but you're just, hoping it stays healthy and it's great.
Yeah, that would be insane.
A big if.
If Stephon Diggs and you got me stuttering because of the thought of Stephon Diggs with this wide receiver core would be amazing. Um, this would only happen if he did take a discounted deal, knowing that the Texans are even with freeing up some of the moves that we're going to get into for the cap space. Like he would still have to take a pretty solid discount in order for him to be a part of this team. Now, who knows? It could happen. I mean, a lot of people fall in love with the city of Houston once they get here. And I think Stephon Diggs has fallen in love with the city of Houston just because of him buying a house already. And I mean, Jeff Van Gundy came over here from New York Knicks. And he still lives here in Houston to this day. And he hasn't coached the Rockets for more than maybe 2 decades. So it's just something with the city that draws to celebrities and fans and players specifically. Stephon Diggs would be a fun idea, but a long shot pipe dream idea at that.
And in the words of the General John McClane, not gonna
Yeah.
happen. Right. But I do agree this should not stop you from, selecting someone else, right? You mentioned a DeMarcus Robinson from the Los
Hmm.
Angeles Rams, right? With them bringing back Tutu Atwell, I think yesterday also, we might be seeing, DeMarcus Robinson trying to find some new threads in 2025. We also, have talked about an Elijah Moore, and this one does excite me, Harley. It really
Hmm.
does. I mean, if you did get one of those two, I would say, all right, maybe you don't have to take a wide receiver at 25. Maybe, you
You
look
can
at one
wait.
of those defensive tackles that we've been desperately needing for seasons since we let DJ Reader go. Um, you bring in another wide receiver, man, and one where we're like, all right, he can be a legit weapon. I'm excited.
Yeah, and again, I do think they're going to go more towards what you're saying. There is kind of bargain bin, thrifty, get a cheaper option wide receiver that they can go with, preferably somebody that can work outside. Considering that Christian Kirk is predominantly a slot
Mhm.
receiver. But I mean, they could go either way. Just get some good football players on your team, and we can work out the chess pieces later. But yeah, I think a good cheap option at wide receiver is still in play for them. And then they don't necessarily have to go wide receiver at
Mhm.
25 unless something just falls to them and they're like, "Oh, okay, no one's going to take Matthew Golden. We'll go ahead and do it." No one's going to take Luther Burden. We're going to go ahead and do it. Even if Ibuka is there, I would go ahead and take a look into it. But there's still plenty of other options that this Texans team needs, and there's plenty out there, man. Offensive line, DT. There's so much to go for when it comes to improving the Houston Texans.
Which is a great segue into our next point. Speaking about the offensive line, there was a move made today, Harley, and that was the Houston Texans announcing that they will be releasing veteran right guard Shaq Mason, who spent the past 2 seasons in Houston, saving themselves $9.4 million. However, you cannot use the $9.4 million until June 1st, because that's when the Houston Texans plan to release him. Now you could use that $9.4 million for the rookies contract, for a Derek Stingley contract extension,
Mhm.
but hardly the Houston Texans decided not to wait, not to, not to, like, not to mess this up, right? A lot of people thought the Texans were going to go in and have Shaq Mason fight for his spot at training camp. No,
Yeah.
we knew that his best football was past him, and I'm glad that the Texans decided to get rid of him. I mean, hey, get rid of him right before NFL free agency. So there will be a new starting right guard for this Houston Texan offensive line in 2025. It's just a matter of, is it a free agent or is it a rookie?
Yeah, I mean, the Texans' offensive line collectively was not good.
God
They
awful.
were they gave up the third most sacks in the NFL, but Shaq Mason specifically gave up the second most sacks by a guard in the league. 10.5 sacks is what Shaq
I
Mason
thought it was
gave up.
8.
I mean, yeah, man.
It's
No,
not, I mean, it's
10
not
and a
good
half
either.
sacks. I mean, he almost he he had more sacks given up than Will Anderson had his rookie year. like
Come on now.
like that's pretty crazy. That's what we're talking about here when it comes to Shaq Mason and how horrible he was in the offensive line, of course. I love this move because there's so much that goes into it. We were so worried that with the
Mhm.
hire of Nick Caley, you have Nick Casario, you bring in Cole Popovich, you retain him and promote him to O line. You know
Not
what I'm
just
going with
O-line.
here. The Patriots connection and Shaq Mason being a former New England Patriot, it did not shock me reading Jonathan Alexander's article because Shaq Mason and his camp, his agency, were surprised that the Houston Texans moved on from him. Can you blame him? He had all of the connections with Nick Caley, Cole
Mhm.
Popovich, and Nick Casario. I was always thinking, well, I would like for them to cut him, but it wouldn't shock me if they kept him. And I am so happy that they're moving forward. They're ripping that page out of the book and throwing it away
Mhm.
because, my goodness, the Houston Texans need help in the interior offensive line. They need it in the worst way possible. A traffic cone was better than Shaq Mason last year, and it would have been a hell of a lot cheaper as well. My goodness. Yeah, exactly. Like Shaq, it was it was not a good year for you, my guy.
Mhm.
It was not. And it was time to move on.
And it's not
You're
like he's
done.
had a horrible career. We're talking about a two-time
No,
Super
Pro
Bowl
Bowl.
champ.
That too. And he's been a Pro Bowler. He was really good for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the
He was good
majority of his
for
career.
us. 2
Yeah,
out of the 3
last
years, he
year.
was good for us.
Last year, he was a solid. He's played solid for us last year.
What was that
This
stat? No
year,
sacks allowed since, like, week 8 last season. Like, he was just
yes.
on it.
Everyone else was hurt but him last year.
Mhm.
And he stood tall in that offensive line for the diminutive Shaq Mason that's like 6'1", 360. But it is just, hey, I don't know what happened over the offseason, but Father Time caught up to him
Quick.
and threw him on the ground fast.
And like we said, it's not nothing bad.
No,
We love Shaq Mason's time
it
here.
is what it is.
We were excited when we made the trade for him, right? He was just coming off of a big year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So you understood the 3-year contract that they gave them, that they gave him. But unfortunately, Father Time catches up. Shaq Mason, we wish you the very best. And
Mm.
maybe he's in retirement with some millions in his bank account. I mean, the perfect life for a Shaq Mason.
I ain't mad at it. I ain't mad at
All
that.
right. So, I mean, what are we doing? Or who would you rather have? Would you rather have a free agent at right guard or a rookie at right guard?
Well, hell, when you mentioned both of them, it's a great way to incorporate Aaron Wilson's tweet. And Aaron Wilson tweeted out earlier today that the Houston Texans plan to look at both
Mm,
free agency and the NFL draft for the guard position. I think that needs to be talked about a lot more in the Texans community,
Shout out to
that the
Aaron Wilson.
Houston Texans are looking to double dip in that department. Does that necessarily mean the same position at right guard? Does that mean that they're looking at left guard and right guard? Because,
Mm.
in my opinion, that would mean that Titus Howard could be moved back to right tackle and Blake Fisher is moved back to the swing tackle. Now, that is the reason Blake Fisher got drafted last year. He was basically replacing George Fant, who did an amazing job for you during his time here. Blake Fisher could be back at being a swing tackle, or he could compete for the job at right tackle with Titus Howard.
And I think he will.
Or it would be very interesting. Or they go with just Titus Howard at left guard and they say, okay, we can get a cheap veteran option at free agency, or just a cheap option in general, and we can draft somebody. Or maybe they just say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and get one of the best guards in free agency. He's 35 years old, and Kevin Zeitler, and he played on a like 6 million or 7 million a year contract last year. He signed a cheap contract last year because he wants to win. And the Texans are on the verge. They're there. Like, they are in there. Okay. Can he be the guy to solidify the right guard spot?
Yes.
And because he's old, you can draft a guard as well and have him be the backup and learn from Kevin Zeitler. And then what's so helpful about him is he's a veteran, he's a Pro Bowler, he's been there, done that, and him next to Juice Scruggs and Titus Howard or Blake Fisher only helps them other two guys get so much better at the O-line position. That's what I would be leaning for.
Kevin Zeitler is someone who I've been talking about since last year when he was a free agent out of Baltimore. The only thing wrong with him is he's 40. No, he's not 40, but he's 35 years old.
Yeah.
Plays the right guard, which
Plays
is,
at a good
exactly what you need. And let's dissect that tweet from Aaron Wilson. And fantastic job by him. Does a great job carving this Houston Texan. To me, double dipping, right? The first part, it sounds like the Houston Texans are looking for a bridge guy. They're not looking for a long-term solution. Now, I do think Titus Howard ends up being your left guard. This is, Titus Howard for me in this situation is your left guard. Kevin Zeitler, 1 to 2 years, Band-Aid, bridge, and then maybe in the first you do a couple trades back and you select the tackle / guard out of North Dakota State.
Okay. Greg
Zabel, yes. And that is your project, because he's going to have to move from tackle to guard. And he's, for the next 2 seasons, learning from Kevin Zeitler. That, I think, will be a perfect situation.
It's not a bad idea. I don't mind it. My only problem is I never seen the Texans draft a non-Power 5 guy. But
yes.
Greg Zabel was a captain at North Dakota State. And so that does check off one of the boxes
Captains
that the
matter.
Texans do look for. But I don't mind the idea. Again, I don't mind that at all. It is extremely helpful. I think it's always helpful for a rookie whenever entering the NFL. It can be a very hard process, and transferring from college, being the top guy, to go into the NFL, and now it's okay, this is what we need you to do, and we need you to do it right now at a very high level because that's your guard. When now you can, let's say, go with your plan of signing Kevin Zeitler, have him be that bridge player for you for, let's say, a 1-year deal since he's 35, and you're trying to go all in with CJ Stroud's rookie contract here, man, and he's the best guard available, arguably in free agency. And so if you grabbed him and you draft at 25, even if you drafted a Tyler Booker, if he's there, Marcus Mbao, like if someone like that is there at 25, I would still draft them and keep them and have them learn from Kevin Zeitler. And he's a veteran. He's a Pro Bowler. This dude's one of the best guards in football and didn't really get his recognition along the way. He's bounced around from teams and bad teams at that. And so him and having a rookie learn from him and having the two sides the two other offensive linemen in connection with him to learn from him as well, I think is a huge plus for the Texans.
No, and one that that I hope happens. Maybe a Will Hernandez at a right guard is someone who we both talked about. I think that is a cheap option. Cheap
Yeah.
is what the
Yes.
Houston Texans need to be looking for. Another money move that they made today, Harley, that was restructuring the contract of linebacker Aziz Al-Shayer's 3-year, $30+ million deal. With his restructure, the Houston Texans save around $6.2 million in cap space. I love this move, but the conclusion that I am drawing, right, from the Nico Collins contract restructure, the Aziz contract restructure, the cutting of Shaq Mason, I think General Manager Nick Caserio has something planned. And as he should, because this is year three of CJ Stroud. This is, I would say, one of your final pushes of this, 5 years. You have everyone in year three. You have Daniel Hunter, on a 1-year deal, Mixon just 2 years left. This is your opportunity to start competing for AFC Championship, Super Bowls. And that's why I think like the Texans, invest a lot in this offseason. And maybe there is one more deal out there that needs to be made.
I don't know what that deal
I
is.
don't.
I don't, but hearing them make this move, first of all, Aziz Asha, you freed up about $6.26 million. Fantastic move. So that's going to be helpful for them in spending money in free agency.
Mm.
Now, we talked about a guard and someone that they're drafting. This is the other end of the spectrum. What if they go and get themselves kind of a bigger fish in the guard department? You can go and get a Will Freeze from the Indianapolis Colts, who is a solid guard
That's
that is
big.
a very much a plug and play guard. You don't have to worry about anything, and he's going to have that guard position sold for you for the rest of how long, ever long that contract is. And then you still can draft another guard. Like
Mm.
you can still draft another offensive lineman. And plus, we're just talking about Scruggs and Patterson like they're there at center, but
Who's to say they don't
there's
get a center?
exactly like this team is looking at guard in the draft, but specifically, they're looking to fix this offensive line. This is step one. Step one was cutting Shaq Mason. They're looking at free agency. They're looking at the draft. The Houston Texans organization is trying to fix this offensive line, and they know fixing this O line is the key to having a successful offense in 2025. And it is a bigger key for CJ Stroud to return to that magical rookie year that you could have with him in 2025 would be super exciting, because me and you both said it. Texans fans said it. You get that rookie year offense of CJ Stroud, you pair it up with the defense you had last year, and you're looking at a team that could have been in the AFC Championship game at the very least.
I've been talking about center Harley for a while now, and I
Yeah.
brought this up a couple of weeks ago. And I
Okay.
said, man, when was the last time the Houston Texans had a quality center? And
Probably
we
Ken
both
Jennings.
said Chris Myers, right? We
Yeah.
thought it was going to be Justin Britt a couple
Yep.
years ago. No, and ever since then, it's been a rotating door. We know that the center from Las Vegas just got cut. We know
Yeah.
that the center from Atlanta is looking to get a big contract this year. Listen, you invested into a second round pick last year in Juice Scruggs. However, I I just don't think you're in a liberty to wait. I think the
Mhm.
sense of urgency needs to be at an all-time high. And you could still let Juice Scruggs figure it out. But
Yeah.
you bring in a center, you draft a guard high, maybe your first two selections. Hey, we're back in business. I want a center. I want a center.
I don't disagree with you. I love Drew Dolman from the Atlanta Falcons. And he's going to want some money, but the Houston Texans cleared up some space. And who's to say they don't? They got to fix the O line. That's
Got
the
to.
bottom line. Well, for the conclusion is to fix the offensive line. You fix it, and offensive success comes back to fruition for the Houston Texans.
Mm. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for today's episode. A lot of big things happened for the Houston Texans. We traded for Christian Kirk. They restructured the contract of linebacker Aziz Al-Shaair. And on June 1st, they are going to be releasing veteran Shaq Mason right guard, saving $9.4 million in the process. That is Harley. I am Ruben. For more Houston Texans content, just come back on Monday. We'll be here at 6 o'clock. You guys do us a favor. Have a safe weekend and have a real blessed rest of your day.